We begin this story in Los Angeles, California, where a beautiful young woman enjoys her time alone in her new house. Despite living by herself, this young lady loves sharing her life on social media, so it's normal for her devices to be overflowing with messages all day long. The problem starts when one of those fans gets her private number and begins to harass her constantly. She believes it's a prank by her boyfriend and decides to call him to ask him to stop, but he has no idea what she's talking about. And that's when she really starts to get scared. The situation escalates when she receives another call from the stalker, only this time he seems to be watching her because he describes the clothes she's wearing. Terrified, the young woman threatens to call the police, but it's already too late. The man is inside her house, and her life is now in danger. She runs to her bedroom and locks the door, where she calls the police, who will take several minutes to arrive. Time she doesn't have, since the intruder is banging on the door with great force. Seconds later, the young woman is brutally beaten to death, all while the killer laughs uncontrollably. A few hours later, the young woman's house becomes a crime scene, and the killer has escaped, having claimed yet another victim. The police call him the copycat killer, and this is the sixth victim found dead in the past year. Detective Nelson is in charge of the investigation. However, over the last year, he's made no solid progress in catching the killer. Detective Gibson, on the other hand, is more aggressive, and she's now been given free rein by the captain to use every means necessary to find the killer before he murders someone else. At about 15,000 feet in the air, we meet Kit, the husband of one of the killer's victims, who is feeling anxious because of the severe turbulence the plane is experiencing. Given the recent death of his wife, it's normal that Kit occasionally sees her in his mind when he's nervous or afraid. She was his anchor, and now he's alone with his daughter. A few minutes later, the plane has to land due to bad weather, leaving Kit stranded in New Jersey without knowing when he'll be able to continue his flight back to Los Angeles. After leaving a message for his daughter, Kit takes a seat in the waiting area. There will be several hours of waiting until the weather improves and he can board his return flight. In Los Angeles, Kit's daughter, Alexis, is following her strict training routine. Her father forced her to take self-defense classes after her mother was killed a year ago. Although Alexis initially resisted because she was a spoiled girl, it was a way of bonding with her father and helping him relieve the guilt he felt for not being there to protect his wife. Luckily, after a few months, Alexis started to enjoy training and ended up learning far more than her father could ever have taught her. She learned so much that, during a fight at school with another girl, Alexis ended up sending her to the hospital with a concussion, which is why she's been under house arrest for the past 6 months. She's frustrated, especially because she's missing her prom that night. Not everything is bad news, though, as the next day her sentence will be over and they can finally remove the ankle monitor. While on a call with her father, who tells her he won't make it back in time that night, someone knocks on the door. It's her friend Tessa, who flirts with Kit through the camera, knowing that he monitors everything happening in the house. After catching up on all the new school gossip, Tessa tells Alexis about the girl who was murdered a couple of nights ago. She also mentions that the killer uses chat forums to find his victims. Nervous about this news, Alexis calms down a bit when she tells Tessa that her father installed many more cameras in the house and is always watching her, although sometimes he can be a bit overbearing with his monitoring. Later that night, Alexis takes a moment to go into the chat forums and catch up on her friend's latest news. Meanwhile, the police have found a clue about the car the killer used, and if they can find security camera footage from around the victim's home, maybe they can get his face from the recordings. Among all the victims pictured on the wall, there was only one who survived, so the detectives decide to call her once more to see if she's remembered anything important about the night she was attacked at home. Alexis takes off her headphones for a moment and hears a noise coming from the kitchen, so the brave young woman goes downstairs to check. Thankfully, it's just her boyfriend, Chris, who got tired of calling out to her since she wasn't listening. So he asks Kit to unlock the door remotely. Now that her boyfriend is with her, Alexis can relax and have a more pleasant night, leaving aside the fact she's missing prom. A while later, Kit calls to check on his daughter and also to remind Chris that he has 15 minutes left for his visit, and not to try anything funny because he can see everything. Without her boyfriend or friend around, Alexis is completely bored and ends up falling asleep in front of the TV. An hour later, she wakes up to a scream coming from the television, which is enough to jangle her nerves. Afterwards, she calls Chris to chat for a bit and calm down before returning to bed. While his daughter sleeps, Kit receives a notification on his phone showing a hooded man at the back door of the house. Desperate, he tries to warn his daughter, but she left her phone in the living room and can't hear him, so he leaves a message and hangs up. He then attempts to call the police, but his phone dies because of a dead battery, causing his panic to escalate. He gets up and starts asking other passengers for a phone, and after losing precious seconds trying to persuade the flight attendant to lend him a charger, Kit is at peak stress. Back at home, Alexis has woken up to look for her phone and listens to her father's warning about the intruder. However, she doesn't take it seriously and calls her boyfriend to tell him that the trick of disconnecting the Wi-Fi didn't work, and her dad saw Chris entering through the back door after visiting hours. Even though Chris did go back home a bit later, the man on camera had a hood on, and Chris didn't. So the killer truly is in the house, and Alexis is in danger. When Kit can finally connect with his daughter again, she admits that it was Chris coming in through the back door, so there's nothing to worry about. After that, Kit seems calmer and takes a moment to thank Beverly, the flight attendant, for her help. However, the killer is still prowling around the neighborhood. He spared Alexis only because he noticed her ankle monitor, but now he's turned his attention to Tessa, who has just arrived home. Once there, Tessa gets a call from the killer, who tries to toy with her for a bit, but she hangs up on him and starts telling Alexis via chat about the dance. While Tessa focuses on writing every detail of the party in a message, the killer has arrived at her home, and now Tessa is in serious danger. At Alexis's house, she can't get to sleep, so she decides to look at old photos of her mother as a way to feel close to her and remember the beautiful moments they shared. Back to Tessa. She gets another call from the killer, who has sent her several photos proving he is inside her house. In an instant, the young woman is fighting for her life. After a few intense seconds of struggle, the man finally overpowers her and beats her to death. Then he throws Tessa's body into the pool before returning to Alexis's house right next door and begins writing to her via chat, all in order to scare her and make the killing a bit more entertaining. Alexis, being more level-headed, tells her boyfriend about the strange messages she's receiving. A minute later, she gets a call from the killer, and she panics when she hears the security system announce that the garage door has been opened. Armed with a bat, Alexis goes down to the garage but only finds a stray cat. She closes the door and returns to the living room, convinced it was a sick prank. Meanwhile, the police are interrogating Sarah, the only survivor of the attacks, but she doesn't say anything important since she only survived by pure luck. Kit, for his part, is having trouble accessing the security cameras, so he asks his daughter to send him a photo from the house, knowing from the motion sensors that she's awake in the living room. In the photo, Kit can see the killer and panics once again. Luckily, Beverly is there, and when she sees the picture, she immediately uses the airplane's emergency phone to alert the police as quickly as possible. At home, the killer makes his move and reveals to Alexis that he can see her, causing her to hide in the closet and call her father, who can only inform her that the police are on their way and remind her of her self-defense lessons. But in the meantime, her best option is to stay hidden and wait for the police. The police arrive at the house, and Alexis can see them through the door camera. But just as she's about to ask for their help, the killer appears behind them and takes out the officer. On the plane, Kit is unable to remain calm, causing a commotion as the rest of the passengers begin to panic. At the station, Gibson has tried to contact the officer who was sent to check Kit's house, but there's no response, so they decide to hurry over to see if everything's okay. Back with Alexis, the situation is extremely tense, and she's having serious trouble hiding from the killer, so she decides to fight for her life. With quick punches, she's able to knock the killer down, but he is relentless. When Alexis thinks she's safe and comes out of hiding, the killer is only waiting for her. The young woman desperately runs, and for a moment, she heads outside, where her ankle monitor is about to activate. However, the killer catches her and drags her back inside. Once in the house, Alexis manages to free herself and tries to run to the kitchen, where she finds the officer's body and takes his gun. Armed and tired of the killer's games, Alexis fires the weapon at him just as Nelson arrives to help. A few minutes later, Kit finally arrives, and his daughter secretly whispers that she has finally caught him. This is when we see a flashback to a few days after Alexis's mother was murdered. Agent Nelson showed her a photo of the prime suspect in the case, and the young woman took advantage of the moment to snap photos of the evidence while Nelson was distracted. In the following months, our heroine used all her resources to track down the suspect, lurking in the chat forums in the hope that he would contact her. When the killer finally came to attack her, she was ready to serve up justice for her mother's death. After confirming it was the same man from the photo, she shot him. Now Kit knows his daughter isn't so innocent after all, yet he still defends her in front of the officers and their suspicions. Meanwhile, Alexis smiles slightly, knowing her plan worked perfectly.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.